Hey, what's up, Mortgage Coach and Trust Engine community? Super excited to have another interview and conversation with Jim Deitch, the author of Strategic Transformation of the Mortgage Industry. Jim, remind me how many copies of this book you sold, and then I think you raised a lot of money for the MBA nonprofit. Would you remind everybody on that?
Surely the books that I wrote with the help of the leaders in the industry that I interviewed have generated about $102,000 of royalties, which has been donated to Mortgage Bankers Association's Opens Doors Foundation. So we're really happy for the industry support of doing that, and really thankful for all those individuals that bought the book, read it, and hopefully applied some of it. But it is really a very heartwarming thing to see the industry support MBA Opens Doors and the families of children with critical illnesses to help with rent and mortgage payments.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing cause, and folks, this book, while it's a few years old, it's just as valuable to read today. I really feel that anybody in leadership in the mortgage industry should read this book. Like, it is an incredible book. And a lot of the transformation that you started talking about many years ago is, it's all becoming very obvious. You knew where the puck was going, and you were right. Last year, I interviewed Jim for the first time. It was called Moneyball Mortgage, which became one of the top 10 interviews I did last year. And I truly don't think there's an interview I've done where I've had more executives and leaders in the industry come up to me and go, "Dave, I loved that Moneyball interview with Jim." I ended up getting asked by Clayton Collins to host a panel called Moneyball Mortgage at a Housing Wire event. So Jim, thank you for being that guy. I mean, together we came up with the headline, but you started Moneyball Mortgage many years before I did when you interviewed Billy Beane, the guy who Moneyball is all about.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was an incredible experience. And again, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, here we are. We did a webinar in October of last year, and we just continued the Moneyball conversation. I may actually show a few slides from that webinar, but something new has happened, the NAR settlement. And as Jim and I were preparing for this conversation, Jim actually, his words were, "Hey, this NAR settlement really changes the game for both mortgage and real estate." So that is the title. That is what we're going to talk about. If you're a loan officer watching this, super relevant to you, and we're going to give you some ideas strategically and tactically that are going to help you. But if you're in the C-suite or you're head of production, I don't care what role you are. If you care about sustainable profitability, survival, and thriving in the mortgage business, I would say tune in, like, pay attention, because Jim and I are going to have a conversation that we think will be very helpful to not only surviving and thriving in this NAR settlement era, but I think we could turn it into a competitive advantage if we execute well. So Jim, why don't you kind of just share at a high level why you think this changes the game?
Well, it reshuffles virtually all of the commission dollars that last year accounted for about $100 billion of gross commission income to brokers and realtors. And it's unclear where all of that reshuffling happens and how big or small the pie ends up after however this shakes out. I've talked to a lot of people, and I think the number of people I've talked to is probably equal to the number of opinions of what's going to happen. So I think it's really interesting of how a mortgage lender, who is a principal in the transaction, because we are at risk for the loan. We are at risk for the performance of that loan as a lender. And everybody else in that transaction really doesn't have skin in the game of how that loan performs. So when you think about the impact on the industry and how the mortgage lender, the mortgage loan officer might think about how they approach the whole residential real estate marketplace, a lot of opportunities. And Dave, looking forward to talking to you about what happens and how it happens and how fast it happens.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you said that. I've had a lot of conversations, and as many conversations I've had different opinions. I would put, first of all, that's true. Although I'd put them in a couple buckets. I've had conversations where it's status quo and it'll all be the same. I've had conversations where, holy shit, this is a really big problem, and people who are truly fearful for their, their survival in this business. And then like I talked to Mitch Kiter, and I really liked my conversation with Mitch because he's like, this is a really big deal. Because it is a really big deal. And you echoed that. Like we haven't prepped. I don't actually know all of Jim's thoughts on this, but I do know him and I are both in the same camp. This is a really big deal. And then I'm also pretty sure that we're both going to agree that, hey, there's a path to really winning, gaining market share, and creating mortgage organizations that have sustainable profitability. Because and Jim, tell me, this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I want to hear your thoughts on this. It's spring, like we're doing this in, the beginning of spring. It's like the first couple days of April, and apps are up. There's a lot of hopefulness. I'm talking to both lenders and loan officers that are feeling the effect of springs. And I do think good times are ahead, but I also know bad times, bad weather and good weather is ahead. And if the industry doesn't leverage the opportunity at hand to create like sustainable margins, like, okay, you're going to get through this cycle, but there's going to be another one and it's just going to be just as bad. So like, I really think the mortgage industry needs to transform now. Like this is the time to transform your model, and this is the time to transform your metrics and how you run your business. Do you align on that?
I absolutely do. And, going back to Moneyball, one of the conversations I had with Billy Bean, who was so generous to share his time on this, talked about what happens when an industry kind of gets locked into a pattern. And he mentioned a team, I won't name it by name, but it's on the East Coast, has a bird as a logo. And the question comes up is, that team gets used to losing. They expect to lose. They expect to do poorly. And if you expect to lose, guess what? You will. And ultimately, 7 quarters of losses for independent mortgage bankers and bank-owned mortgage companies, as published by the MBA, how does one get up in the morning and say, I'm okay with 7 quarters of losses? You're not okay with 7 quarters of losses. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And, friends of mine in the business say the warehouse lenders are calling and saying, what are you going to do? The investors are calling, what are you going to do? The GSEs are saying, what are you going to do? Ginny's going, where's your liquidity? This is not sustainable. But we've gotten into a rut that says, well, the industry sucks. It's really tough out there. It's okay to lose money. No, it's not. Losing is a choice. Losing is a choice, whether it's money or baseball.
I love that. Losing is a choice. I want to put a link down below to one of the interviews that Jim and I did, because we really laid the foundation that if lenders just started measuring and managing by conversion and measuring and manage by concessions, instead of celebrating loan officers who, close a lot of loans, do a lot of production, but we celebrate those guys, but we would celebrate like the biggest person we'd celebrate is, hey, who closed a lot of loans, does a lot of production, has best of breed conversion, we'd gamify that. We would Moneyball that. And I personally, from the numbers I've seen, Jim, I know it's not just that simple, but it's almost that simple that there's a lot of lenders that had a losing quarter, and maybe they would have had 1 or 2 bad quarters. But if they just played the Moneyball mortgage that we laid out in the past, half their quarters of unprofitability go away. Like they would, their loan officers would use MortgageCoach. They'd be great customers of ours because we would be helping them play Moneyball Mortgage, but they'd be profitable. You still agree with all that?
I agree with that 100%. And I'd like to share a story. We, like many mortgage technology companies, were at the Encompass ICE experience a couple of weeks ago. And we decided to take a survey the old-fashioned way. We had pins that you would stick on the wall. And we had green pins for banks and yellow pins for credit unions and white pins for independent mortgage bankers. And think of this as kind of a square. And at the top of the square was 100%, and the bottom of the square was 0%. And we asked people to take a pin and just put how much of the available automation and technology are you currently using? And 100%, 0%. And we got about 170 lenders that put a pin in. Dave, where do you think they put it? Higher or lower than 10%? In other words, more
Wow,
than—
I thought you were going to say higher is lower than 50%. Well, if it's lower than 10%, that's really tragic. I would have guessed in the 30% range, but what was it?
It was about 23%.
About, by the way, guys, you know how you know someone's a data nerd is when they say an exact data. It was about 23%. Like,
Well, I'm not a data nerd, but I just want to be precise, right?
yeah, no, I know. I'm having fun with you, Jim.
But here's the thing. These people are at a technology conference walking around, and they admit to themselves that they're only using a quarter of the available automation in their LOS. And this just isn't in Compass. We've done it at other LOS systems. So think of it. We're having crappy performance. We have too many people in the industry. Our costs are high, but we're satisfied with 25% usage of the available automation. If you just turned it on and changed your business process, you'd have substantial improvement in cost, which led me to the next question on the right side of the board. How much money in terms of profit would you increase per loan if you used all of the available data in your technology stack? Meaning all that information you have in there, what if you harvested it? How much more per loan would you earn? And the choice was 0 or 4,000. Where do you think it came in?
I mean, it wasn't good. I'm not going to guess the number here.
$2,100.
Wow.
And I'm sitting with people, and I'm trying to be nice because we don't want to be rude. But the question I'd ask him is, if you know you're only using a quarter of your available automation, and if you fully use the data to make better decisions and run your business better, you'd make $2,100 more per loan. That's your number. That's not me. That's you telling me. Why don't you do it? And literally, yeah, I know I should.
Well, I always love my interviews with you, and everyone listen to this. I know I'm going to have a lot of customers listen to this. We're going to have a lot of, prospects of Trust Engine listen to this, and we're going to have a lot of loan officers listen to this. And so, for the mortgage professionals, and especially the producing branch managers, the producing branch manager is the hardest job in mortgage. I do believe it's the most important job in mortgage because you are where change takes place. First of all, you should be leading by example. And now you kind of heard that. If you were leading a branch and you made sure that, you can't control the entire organization that you work for, but you can control your branch. And by the way, you can control yourself. And so just a super strong push to every branch manager listening to this, step it up. I can, I'm not going to ask for 100% utilization, but 70, 80%. Like there's just no reason not to be, when it comes to MortgageCoach, we have so much data that if you deliver a MortgageCoach experience to a consumer, it's at least 10% higher conversion, which in many cases is the difference between profitability and not profitability. We know that it's worth at least 10 basis points in concessions. And we've seen, I guess we did have one lender that showed us 6% difference in MortgageCoach, but most lenders are like 18 to 35% improvement in concessions. Like branch managers, you could help your companies. And then the beauty of not only can you help your company, you would be making a lot more money yourself if you just took the advice that Jim has.
Well, and Dave, I'd love, I think last time we were on, we talked about the basis point impact between loan officers that were acting professionally and using all the available technology available to them in MortgageCoach. And I thought it was an incredibly high number of, those who do versus those who don't. I don't recall exactly what it was. Was it 60 basis points, something like that?
Well, yeah, I'll actually, I have some slides from that.
Oh, what a
that we
setup.
did. Yeah, I mean, come on, I'm Mr. Prepared here. And remember, guys, go back and watch this stuff because Jim did a really nice job of just really showcasing the difference. Actually, you got something on my screen here. You did a really nice job of just showing like, hey, there's top tier loan officers. That's got nothing to do with how many loans they close. It has to do with profitability per loan, and middle tier, and then bottom tier. And it was just staggering. I mean, you look at this. Wait, where is the profit per loan on this one? Did I get the right
You
slide?
just had it. You had a revenue less compensation per file.
Yeah. And oh yeah, there it is. And it's the bottom tier that's killing the industry. And when we, in this webinar, we showed an actual real live case study. This was from NFM Lending. 94 of their loan officers that use MortgageCoach were 65 basis points more profitable than the 319 that don't. Now, by the way, that's a big number. That's the first time we've seen that big of a delta. Usually, it's in the 30 basis points. I'm actually looking for the Churchill example. But anyways, it's a meaningful difference.
Well, and just on a $400,000 loan, Dave, 30 basis points of concessions is $1,200.
Right.
And the industry lost almost, $1,300 in the last quarter per loan. And if you think about really where those losses come from, and my team has done a lot of research on this. It really comes from two areas: lack of conversion from top of the funnel to closed loans, and concessions and revenue leakage coming out of mostly concessions, but cures and unrecovered credit pull fees. And if you think of how much that did, we had a client, we just finished this for 101 basis points was the load on every closed loan that revenue leakage had to absorb. In other words, 101 basis points of fallout and concession cost and cure cost had to be carried by those loans that actually closed. And if you're taking 100 basis point tax on every loan because of poor management, how can you possibly make money? And this is where I say, if you become acceptable, if losing becomes acceptable, it's beyond me. You cannot let losing become acceptable. It just isn't. And you can't be throwing all this money out the door. It's not possible to make money when you have that type of leakage. And Dave, for professional loan officers who really do a great job with the customer and have that pull through and don't have to concede. Incidentally, concessions, it's a self-inflicted wound. It meant that there's no other difference to do business with you than rate. You failed to give that customer any value whatsoever. So it comes down to do business with you, you're going to have to give me a discount. That's crazy.
Well, let's do this, because I know, one, you've got some new numbers, you got some new tools, and I have some new questions. But before we get there, I do want to really get your crystal ball out on NAR, because part of the headline here is how NAR settlement changes the game, and your crystal ball on this. And then I do have some very specific tactics that I want to share around how I think you can gain market share. I do think the loan officers that are doing the right things are going to just clean up. There's going to be more realtors changing who their lending partners are between now and the rollout of that than any time in history, in my opinion, because no longer is it going to be like, oh, I like you, you close loans on time, you've got great rates. Like, those will be factors. They're not going to go away. But trust me, guys, realtors pick lenders based off who's going to get them the check. And now they got to get a contract signed. They got to negotiate their compensation to get the check. And they're going to be like, I'm going to work with the loan officer that's going to help me get a contract signed and help me, negotiate my compensation, because they don't get to sell the home if they don't, like getting to first base is like a whole new thing for buyer's agents and listing agents. So we'll share some ideas on that.
Yeah. Well, I think, Dave, the thing that really had to happen, and we talked about this, in all three books, is if you think about it, the purchase of a home has so much cost attached to it. So I'm a buyer, I scrape together 5% down payment. And then I look at my cash going out in the transaction, and 5 or 6% is going to the realtor. And effectively, if you looked at the cost of the loan, although it's not explicit, it's 400 basis points or 4%, and you add the title in, it's 1.5%. So I come to the table with 5% cash down payment, and I see 5 going to the realtor, 4 going to the lender, 1 going to the title agent, 10% is going out the door in transaction costs. And I think, why am I doing that? I can see that house, it's perfectly visible. Why am I spending all this money to buy a home and essentially liquidating my down payment times 2 because of transaction costs? And I think NAR absolutely was crazy not to contain this litigation, because it spun completely out of control. And when the headlines are realtor commissions are $100 billion a year and it's not right for the consumer, they completely lost the legal argument. Because what person hasn't bought a loan, what person hasn't sat, who is on the jury of these things, thinking, yeah, I bought a $300,000 loan, I paid $18,000 in commission, and what did I get? Why? It was a colossal miscalculation in case management, number one. And second, consumers are now sensitized that the commission's negotiable. It's going to have a downward pressure on the aggregate dollars available. So Dave, I mean, is that square with your analysis, or am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's gonna be commission compression. I think, the only nuance that I'd add 2 nuances. One, I think it's gonna have a greater effect on the higher end. So, the more higher price the home, paying that buyer's agent, 3% of a multi-million-dollar home is going to make a lot less sense than paying it on a lower end home. So, there'll be more compression on the higher end. And then I do think it's pretty fascinating. I don't have a strong opinion on this, but I've talked to enough people and enough buyers to know that, hey, there's some sellers that are going to be like, hey, I'm going to pay the listing agent top notch, and I'm going to go, I've talked to people that are going to be like status quo. I've talked to people that are going to be like, oh, I'm going to pay the listing agent, but less on the buyer's agent, or put more pressure on the listing agent to help sell the home. But I've also talked to people that are like, you know what? Listing the home is clerical, and I'm going to put a big reward on the buyer side. So I just think it's going to be interesting to see it actually plays out. And I don't know. Any thoughts on those nuances yourself?
I think it's going to play out almost down to the individual markets and the individual agents of how they present themselves. Because at the end of the day, if you as a buyer or you as a seller don't feel there's value being delivered by who's ever involved in that transaction, you're going to put pressure on that piece of advice that you don't feel provides value, whether it's the mortgage banker or the listing agent or the buyer's agent or the selling agent. And I've heard all kinds of reasons, and I'd almost say they're almost rationales of people trying to defend their position of, well, Freddie and Fannie are going to have to change and recognize that if you pay a buyer's agent, it ought to be includable in the amount financed and treated as a de facto concession, and therefore buyer's agents will be fine. And I've talked to listing agents that said, why do we need buyer's agents? The buyer should just come to me. I have both sides, and then I can do a little bit, work to help that buyer, get things done. It's no different. It's dual agency. The buyer and the selling agent were both representing the seller anyway. What's the difference? And I've talked to mortgage lenders that say it really depends. And if you find someone who provides a lot of value to the constituent in the transaction, they'll pay the full price. I mean, I listed a house recently and I paid the full commission. Why? Because the people that were doing it, I had great trust in, and they did a really good job, and it was worth it. So it just comes down to the same reason that I think that sometimes concessions are a self-inflicted wound. If you don't provide value, nothing is left but rate, whether you're a realtor or whether you're a mortgage lender or a title agent or a title attorney.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Well, before we get in, by the way, can we agree on this? I don't know exactly, right now the date is July 1st. It's hard to imagine that all this will have to take place by then, but that is the date at the moment. But that, right now, even in markets where buyer's agents do have buyer's agreements, those buyer agreements are signed either at the offer or at listing. Like, it is not commonplace that I know of in any states where before they even show a home, they're getting an agreement signed. And then I don't know where they're negotiating their compensation. That's going to be like the entire industry is going to have to shift to that. And I just believe, and can we agree on that the loan officer needs to really show tangible value of how they're going to help that buyer's agent. You need to work with me because I'm helping you make a more informed decision. And and they have all these things, but there's things that they're not doing right now, like give a rent versus own analysis and really show that consumer, if it's our first time home buyer, like what their net worth is going to be in 5 years. And if it's a move up buyer, you're going to be able to make a case that, yeah, I know you have to sell this home with a 3.25% rate or 4.25% and take a higher rate, but let me show you how that's going to impact your net worth over 5 years, in 10 years. Like, those are going to become standard services in mortgage and real estate, I believe. Do we agree on that?
Dave, we totally agree on that, because the advice being given by a mortgage loan officer to a prospective buyer, particularly a first timer, it's a confusing process. It's a difficult process. And when I look at the statistics on the net worth of individuals in the United States, the difference between the net worth of an owner of a home and the net worth of a renter is astronomically different. And the reason is that the equity created by owning a home, regardless of the rate, as my friend Dave Stevens said, own the home, rent the mortgage. So I have a question for you, Dave. Since this whole pandemic and the COVID refinance boom started, we started with $16 trillion of home equity across the country, meaning the difference between the total value of the real estate and the total mortgage debt was $16 trillion of equity. What is it today?
I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's a lot.
It's $35 trillion.
I was going to get it. I almost had it. Yeah, I was going to say it just seemed too high. But yeah, it's insane.
So if you think of that, people who were renters and did not buy a home and waited for whatever reason, versus someone who bought a home, the aggregate equity went up almost $20 trillion. And people that didn't own a home missed out. And now they're trying to get in up here. And one can say, well, if I'm waiting to get in up here, maybe it'll fall. Last time I saw a really scarce asset depreciate is I cannot remember. We don't have enough housing in this country right now. And the upward pressure on real estate is going to continue. So the benefit of understanding rent versus buy as just one thing, it's eye-opening, and it takes away the, well, all right, so I'm going to give up my 3.5% mortgage and get a 6.5% tax-deductible mortgage, but I'm getting in on an asset that's appreciating it and levering it, 5 to 1, 8 to 1, 10 to 1, 20 to 1. Where else can you do that? You can't.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. I do want to show a quick visual because I want people to see some data on this. And this is a slide that, First Home IQ publishes which is a nonprofit, dedicated to helping loan officers and realtors bring more value to consumers. But I mean, this is the wealth gap in America, guys. Owning versus renting. And when you look at the data and the demographics, to Jim's point, the wealth gap is just widening. And so, this is a screenshot from MortgageCoach by Trust Engine where, you're able to show at the point of sale to the consumer that, hey, here's renting in 5 years, here's owning. And in this particular case, it was a first-time home buyer that was going to rent out 2 of the bedrooms. And the mortgage coach was able to say, hey, look at your equity increase. And, you said you're going to invest that at X this is your return on investment. Look at your net worth over 5 years. So by the way, if you are a consumer, are you going to want to work with a loan officer that says, hey, this is your rate, this is your payment, and this is your cash to close? Are you going to be impressed with someone that is actually helping you understand the wealth gap in America and who's helping you make a more informed decision? Like, I know who I'm going to work with. So just wanted to show a couple slides and a little data.
Dave, if you don't mind, could you go back to that wealth gap? Because I think that is one of the most powerful visuals that one could get. And what it really says in English to a consumer is, if I started in 2010 and I saved $5,400 and I just paid rent and I went through my life, 12 years later, I'd have $10,000. That rate of return is abysmal. But if I would have started and picked up this $396,000 increase in net worth, it's a powerful experience. And I got to live in the home of my dreams. That's the thing about it that's so powerful. And when you think about rates and down payments and DTIs, that's not really, in my mind, what's important. And just pointing this out in the hands of a well-trained originator, the value prop of being able to say, I can help you build worth. And if you take this graph back, and I don't have it handy, Dave, but I've done this back in research into the 1890s, this pattern continues. This is not something that happened just this year or just because of COVID or just, it's a consistent pattern that wealth accumulation comes from home ownership.
Yeah, if you, in any graphs you have on that, I'd love for you to forward them, because I'm, helping our community deliver a more compelling presentation. It's one presentation if you're talking to a first-time home buyer. It's a different if you're talking to a move-up buyer, but we really need to help the real estate industry and the lending industry deliver it. And so I'm looking for some graphs like that. And just a reminder, when you're giving these presentations for all you producing branch managers, one, you need to show macroeconomic data, but then you need to localize it and you need to personalize it. So, and that's where all the local distributed retail players, to show the macroeconomics and then break it down for that consumer based off of where you're buying, based off of your goals, based off what you think homes are going to appreciate. I need to go macro and I need to go micro. And that is going to be an important skill of the future. So I think, I think we hit a lot of the stuff. What are your thoughts on, clearly the mortgage coach loan officer is going to have an advantage, but I also think with this, the value of databases have gone up. Like, it's always been important to optimize your database, but I truly believe that the value of a database has gone up in value. What are your thoughts on that, Jim?
Yeah, the value of data, particularly at the branch manager and the region and the ownership levels, is really powerful. We had an example when people were putting those pins in. You remember I said it was $2,100 would be the average difference if you fully used all the data. And I said, so why aren't you doing it? And people said, well, it's too hard. I don't know what to ask. It's really difficult. Do you mind if I show you something?
Of course, please.
We put together a tool called Coheus Git, which stands for Generated Intelligence Technology. And you can just ask a question. We talked about fallout, so I'm going to just ask it a little bit about revenue leakage. And I'm really interested in what happened and where we lost, how much revenue is lost from loans that ultimately fell out. So I'm just asking that a question. And I think I may have just had to refresh this. Bear with me 1 second. So this is an answer, and we start with the answer in English. So top of the funnel, about 75% of the loans were originated from RESPA app, but only 21.5% of the loans from started were originated. And the revenue lost on this. So here's the loan started going down to the loans that actually originated. And there's the waterfall of from top of funnel down to the bottom, 1 out of 5. And, you know, Billy Bean would say that's not a really great batting average. I suppressed the revenue on this because some of this is proprietary to the lender. But just on the loans that fell out, loans that were approvable and had great credit characteristics, $1.5 million because that borrower walked away for whatever reason. Now, maybe they walked away because the transaction fell apart. Maybe they couldn't find a home. Maybe they found a better deal. But that's a lot of money to leave there. And we found out on this potential customer, I blacked it out not to embarrass the particular lender. Out of those 6,100 units, almost 2/3 of them had at least an in-file pulled. Some of them had full pulled. And the credit report fees that were unrecovered here were unbelievable. And as you go through this and just look at the total dollars on this, $2 million just walked out the door. This could be done with companies, it could be done with regions, it could be done with a branch. And if you're not really considering what that leakage is on concessions, cures, and just lack of pull-through, it is a huge number. We showed this at ICE Experience, and a couple of the ICE Encompass people came over from the development labs, and they were like, how'd you do that? And how'd you do it so fast? And can we see it down to the loan officer? And yeah, we showed it down to the loan officer. Can we see it down to the processor? Yes, you can. Can you see it down to the underwriter? Yes, you can. And Dave, those numbers you showed at the beginning of the difference between the top tier, the middle tier, and the bottom tier, it's unbelievable. Your bottom tier is costing you in this environment a large amount of your profit. And however you do it, you got to find out, really who the people are contributing profit and who the people that aren't. And coach them up. Don't tolerate a losing attitude. Coach them to winning.
Yeah, that's it. By the way, I'd be willing to bet that when you really look at the difference between the bottom tier and the middle tier, it's also who's actually leveraging their technology. Who's using MortgageCoach, who's using their CRM. I got to show you something else. Because one of the things that we're trying to do here at Trust Engine is give lenders more visibility on conversion. And this is anonymized. The green is opportunities in their database, and the pink are RESPA apps. They took an RESPA app, and the orange are closed loans, to where you can really start seeing on a per loan officer level, data signals converted into app, converted into loans. And, notice like there's a couple of these where that's not good, that's not good. And where you can really coach them up. Another thing that we're doing, Jim, since we last talked, we've been doing the borrower intelligence platform since before we talked, but going beyond credit triggers. First of all, we believe, and Mitch Kiter called it out the other day, that the actual credit trigger, it's going to go away for the vast majority. Now, if it's a lender who actually is servicing the loan, we believe they'll still be able to do it. But if you originated a loan, but you're not servicing it, you're not going to be able to get these triggers. And then, the problem with all these alerts is that they're in the market. It's a red ocean. By the time you're getting this as a lender, you and everybody else is calling that consumer. They're in the market. And the real magic is getting to the sweet spot. And by the way, Jim, how valuable would it be if you told a realtor that I'm going to be able to predict in your database who's most likely to want to move up, who's most likely to want to move down, who in your database has the presence of a first-time home buyer. And so literally realtors are scrambling, but if you could let me show you how I can drive value. And this is another thing we're doing at Trust Engine, Jim, because loan officers don't always take action on everything. We're automating a message. So the second we see someone's in the money, we're starting, an automated email conversation with them. It's creating a mortgage coach experience. And then this will actually be announced next week, Jim. So you're one of the first people seeing this, but we created an app. We're not going to be a CRM. We're not going to be in the CRM space. There's a lot of great CRMs out there, but we know that most loan officers don't log in to their CRM. They're not gonna log in to their CRM. So let's create an app that just shows your top people in your database that, one, are in the money, they're an opportunity, and two, they're engaged. Oh, they clicked on the email. They visited the website. And then let's make it easy for the loan officer to click a button and call them, text them, or email them. By the way, this is the call, text, or email. And then let's give a script to the loan officer that, hey, based on this opportunity, here's exactly what to say when you call that consumer. What are your thoughts on that?
If you don't use it, you are going to be left behind, because the amount of intelligence that's been put into that particular platform to be able to go through and using predictive analytics to come up with, here's someone who's highly likely to be interested in your message and interested in your product, and you can help them. And you can get in front of them sitting and saying, I'm glad you called. I was thinking about that. Well, now you have somebody that you can take to a realtor, and instead of you asking for referrals from them, you're bringing them a referral with an understanding that not only am I going to do this deal, but I expect you to give me some other deals, and this needs to be reciprocity. So, David, what you just showed me is the essence of using that data that's available, and that $2,100 is when you really just have a loan that you have in process. What you've just showed me is $12,000 worth of value, because that's the total rev that comes out of the typical loan that gets originated top line. So do you want to take advantage of investing some of your time and a few of your dollars into getting a $12,000 value to you? And the value of that to a realtor is, I have a deal that's financeable and I just need to help them find a home. My gosh, why wouldn't you do that? And no, this is not a paid announcement for Mortgage Coach. It's common sense.
Yeah. So I want everybody to think about what Jim just said. Think about at your next realtor meeting to actually be able to pull out this app and show them all the opportunities that you have. Show them how you're taking action, how you can engage with them, and then think about showing them things, like the total cost analysis and the rent versus own that I showed earlier. How do you think realtors are going to respond to that? I think it's going to be pretty favorable.
I think you're taking them something other than rate sheets and a donut. And, I know that's kind of old, but Dave, the power of data and the power to create a story and a narrative that says, here's how we can help this consumer get what they want is, I think, pretty powerful.
So Jim, any, because I'm a big fan. I want people to read your book, want them to watch the content. The platform you guys have built over at Terra Verde just gets better and better and better. I mean, when you first showed me how you're top tiering loan officers for profitability, not just production. I loved it. And then to see how easy you've made it for a lender to, ask questions and then drill into the data. And I love hearing how not only can they do it at the loan officer level, they can do it at the processor level. I'm assuming that they can do it at the branch and regional level, so that we can really look at, hey, where are we winning within our platform and where are we losing? That's going to be a really important part of the survival and the thriving going forward. Anything else you want to show about your platform, or anything else you want to share before we run out of time here?
Dave, I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you and just have a discussion. I know it's a tough time for lenders. I'd leave you with just two thoughts. And the first is the attitude of being a winner really starts with training and preparation and using the tools, whether it's MortgageCoach or Coheus or anything else that you have at your fingertips, to be better equipped and to harness the data. Because the common element of what I think will be the winners in the next 5 to 6 to 7 years will be those who find a way to effectively harness the power of data and do it with the simplicity and ease of literally just being able to pull it out of your pocket. So it's going to be the difference. I just absolutely know that. So again, appreciate the time just to chat with you. Always great to see some of the things that you're doing. Very impressed with the power of what you're putting in someone's pocket to be able to identify borrowers who have a need and who have the ability and who could benefit from not only buying a home, but I saw your debt consolidation. There's lots of uses of data, and it will be the difference between the winners and the losers.
Yeah, I did a training a couple of days ago because I truly believe I came up with a term that I call the level 5 data-driven mortgage coach. And I'm going to have to add a couple of questions because after hearing you, there's another level. If you are an executive and you can't drill down at a level of conversion and profitability on a per loan officer basis, you're not a level 5 data run organization. The way I put it to loan officers is like, I ask loan officers all the time, how many records do you currently have in your database? And most loan officers can't even answer that. And I always just say, well, then, hey, you're not level 5. Like, if you don't know that, if you don't know what your conversion is based off of credit reports run to conversion, you're not level 5. If you don't know how many of your clients in your database you're converting, you're not a level 5 leader. But you've just added another thought to, being a data-driven mortgage company that is creating data-driven mortgage coaches at scale. Like, that is the future of lending. I do believe people that, operationalize and execute on that are gonna thrive. Where can people go to learn more about your company, follow you? I don't know if you're active on social media. What are just the best ways to get in touch with you for anyone that wants to?
Probably the easiest is terraverde.com, and happy to do that. Dave, I have one teaser I'd like to show you before we go, if that's okay.
Yeah, bring it.
Awesome. So we talked about fallout. This is the next step. You saw the show me revenue leakage. What I'm showing you here is aggregate for this company, where the loan started in the waterfall. So what the top of funnel to actual loans settled and where the withdrawals were, what that funnel looked like in terms of volume, where the fees are leaking and how much money has just literally walked out the door. There's 8.2 million on this lender, and how far in the funnel for those opportunities lost, those withdrawals and denials, how far did they go? And as you see, there's a lot of processing cost, a lot of underwriting cost here. So you can look at this at the aggregate. You can look and compare it 23 versus 22. And ultimately, I won't do this, but you can get it down to, if you go over here, you can get it down to the branch, to the loan type, to the purpose, to the originator. So this power is at your fingertips. And if you're a branch manager, non-producing branch manager, regional owner, president, whatever it is, This is the type of information where you will find how literally dollars are slipping through your fingers, and how you can catch them and recover some of that $2,100 that you as a group told me is slipping through your fingers. You know it. Let's just close our hands and grab it and take advantage of it.
Your platform just gets better and better every time we do this. Guys, reach out to Jim if any leaders that I have relationships with, you want me to make an introduction or help out in any way, you can email me at dave@trustengine. Follow Terra Verde. We'll put a link down below. Would love to see the industry embrace your platform, become more data-driven. Of course, we want to help you here at Trust Engine optimize your database. Think of it as like we are in the business of helping you pull incremental extra loans that you're not otherwise getting out of your database to create loans now. Like the industry, you guys need loans now. We want to help you do that, and we want to help you through Jim be more profitable and execute. So Jim, until the next time, brother, anytime you want to jump on Zoom and do this, I'm game. I really appreciate it. And hopefully everybody watching this, you got a lot of value. If you do not already follow the Mortgage Coach YouTube channel, follow it. Remind your loan officers that Trust Engine has, the top Facebook group. Follow that. And thanks for your time, everybody. Take care, Jim.
Dave, thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too, brother.